It is now 6:47. Is there any comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, let's move to discussion item number 3.
Thank you. This is the monthly report for February for the Building and Housing Department. Three items of interest that we're going to bring your attention to this month. One, promise to keep you updated on what's going on with the Davis Oil property. I know this report says there's no new developments, but we do have a new development as of the other day. We received word that the DEP and the estate and the prospective buyer have agreed on terms of the agreement of sale. So we're hoping that that gets signed in short time frame here. Once that agreement of sale is signed, then they will move forward with obtaining demolition permits. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that that gets done here soon. I don't have a date though.
I think I asked this last month. So there are fines that we've levied against that property, correct?
There are, yes.
And maybe 6 months ago, when you reported on this, we were waiting to see if they were going to get an agreement of sale, and it's paying those fines part of the agreement of sale?
No, because the new buyer is not responsible for those fines. It's the estate who's responsible to pay those fines. The estate has no money to pay those fines.
But it could be part of the agreement of sale. How much are we forgoing?
No, they can't be, because it's not a civil matter. Those are quasi-criminal fines, and we can't do that. If we want to try to obtain those fines, we'd have to file a complaint with the Court of Common Pleas, or we would need to go file a judgment with the Orphans Court, because it's an estate. So there's some legal processes that we would need to follow to obtain them. We can't put summary criminal fines into an agreement of sale.
Approximately how much money are we talking about?
$12,000 to $15,000.
Okay, thank you.
Zukin Hotel, we hope to get an application for the demolition of the existing building there at the corner soon. I was advised that we would be seeing it, within the next couple of weeks. So I will keep everybody updated on the progress that's made with that application. Effective February 14th, the Commonwealth is now utilizing the 2018 international codes. So the International Building Code, the International Plumbing Code, the Residential Code. So I just wanted to give everybody an update on that. We have switched over to that. We will be enforcing those for any new application that's received. And it's important that we continue to, utilize these newer code models for, the built community, and ensuring that we're following the latest code provisions that are available to us. You can scroll down, Jeff. Real quick, I'll just run through a couple of numbers here. It was a pretty good month for trash tickets. We've obviously have a new employee on board. He's been busy out there in town looking for violations and doing some proactive enforcement. We issued 92 trash tickets in the month of February. Did issue 33 building permits, and for a total of $20,000 there in revenue. We did 88 dwelling unit inspections and conducted 18 building inspections for the month, and did issue 1 citation. Take any questions?
You can proceed to item number B.
So the item number B is a presentation by the Thomas Doherty. He's the one of the members of the Planning Commission. Here to give you a brief presentation on accessory dwelling units. This is something that as part of the zoning update that we've completed recently, the comprehensive update, this is an item that we had discussed during that update on whether or not we were going to try to incorporate accessory dwelling units into that. We felt that it was just too large of an item to tackle with that update, given the size of the entire text that we were dealing with. So we decided to break these larger topics off to side discussions and have the Planning Commission review them individually and bring a presentation to Borough Council on how we want to, if we want to incorporate them into a future zoning amendment. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Doherty to give you this presentation on accessory dwelling units.
As he said, my name is Thomas Doherty. I'm a member of a Planning Commission and grateful for your time this evening. Kevin said brief, so I'll be brief. But I did want to start with this, and I think it's so important that we go back to the comprehensive plan as that guiding document for the borough. The only real question I got when I was being interviewed for Planning Commission was, do you know the comprehensive plan? Have you read it? And I had. So why is Planning Commission bringing something to you proactively? The purpose of a community's comprehensive plan is to look to the future and design a roadmap in the form of policies, recommendations, and strategies for future development, redevelopment, conservation. While the plan itself is not a regulation, it should be used to inform future laws such as zoning. And zoning is so critical to the built environment. It shapes the way that we interact with each other in the community, and it's often invisible. Are you flipping these? Okay. So I'm here to talk about accessory dwelling units. So what is an ADU? And here is a definition that ARP gives us. Basically, there are different forms of a secondary dwelling unit equipped with kitchen, sink, and stove. So that if you were to get to the HUD definition, that's what it would be. And you can find them detached, attached, interior, and many probably exist in Westchester itself. There's been a lot of talk and movement around ADUs in the last, say, 4 or 5 years. And cities on the West Coast, after doing surveys, were finding that as many as 1 in 4 lots actually had these, was just simply illegal. But it's not new to Westchester. Here is the Historic Carriage House Ordinance of 2001, which legalized ADUs in historic carriage houses in the borough. And ADUs have been part of the borough's history since before the Revolution. In fact, if you look at, it's cutting off, but when streets were platted, they were platted as street or alley. And you often find in the Sanborn maps dwellings along these alleys. And here on Prescott Alley, we have versions of these historic. So Chester County talks about why ADUs, and I was supposed to be presenting with the chair of the Planning Commission, who is on Chester County's planning staff and is unfortunately unable to be here because he's working for the county. But they talk about affordability, and that's not just to create, so ADUs can create additional income for the homeowners and provide quality affordable housing for options for renters. So these are all quotes from Chester County. Aging population support, that's key. Open space protection, less so for the borough, but for the county as a whole. Existing infrastructure efficiencies, neighborhood character. So aging in place, this is a key one. Chester County senior population will double by 2045, or at least that's the projection. Attainable housing in Chester County. Accessory dwelling units are one part of the solution to workforce housing needs. ADUs share a lot within the existing home and are subordinate in size and location of primary residence. So a lot of these counties are looking to ADUs as not a solution to affordable housing, not a solution to aging in place, but a key aspect of a municipality's response to it. And this is a year old and already quite outdated, as many of the municipalities within Chester County has already adopted some form of accessory dwelling unit, including us with our historic carriage house ordinance. So the document that you have has, zoning is kind of a blunt instrument. There are only about 6 or 7 things that zoning can really affect for lots. And so I'm going to go through a few of those, and the document that you have has those as well. So Chester County as a whole, I think, so this is West Vincent, this slide. West Vincent has an ADU policy. So if you go to Chester County website, they'll recommend it, if you're looking to enact ADU legislation. And so I wanted to start with the fact that as a borough, we have alleys. And these alleys mean that we should approach ADUs at least slightly differently. West Vincent, not having them, they don't have that civic realm. So if we're going to have, if we were to allow, let's say, new detached ADUs, and most likely that's going to be garages that are then converted, that upper part, to an ADU unit, or maybe the whole thing, we need to think carefully about what we allow on our shared civic realm of the alley. So on the West Coast, you see, West Coast also doesn't have alleys primarily, and you see a lot of these prefab startups. Silicon Valley actually, California passed statewide legislation in 2017, and almost overnight there were, a dozen startups in Silicon Valley offering ADUs, and this is the kind of thing that's being dropped into people's backyards. And I would argue where that might be appropriate for West Vincent or pieces of our borough that don't have the alleys, we need to think carefully about what actually gets legalized. And on the left, we have one of our lovely historic carriage houses, and on the right, what happens when you simply allow ADUs by right without design guidelines. So one of the key pieces of the legislation that Planning Commission has been thinking about is very simple design standards for if we were to allow ADUs, for those ADUs being built on alleys, to make the most of that ADU being put in, and so that it contributes rather than is detrimental to that civic realm. So there are a few different things, like I said, that zoning can actually do. One of them is occupancy, right, and use. So typically, ADUs can be restricted in two different ways with occupancy. One would say that the person living in the accessory dwelling unit needs to be a family member of the person who owns the main lot. The other one would say, well, to build one, we need the homeowner to be the main occupant of the building. Now, a group like ARP would say both of those are far too restrictive and we shouldn't have either one. As a planning commission, so this is a document that was mostly written by myself and Chris Patriarca, who's not here this evening. We were kind of selected by the planning commission. We've all talked about it, but I just want to say it's not that we've all voted on this document that you're looking at. This is a living document. But we think that it's probably appropriate to have some restrictions in Westchester. Perhaps to build an ADU, you need to actually be living on the lot itself. So an absentee landlord could not then build an ADU. And the thought being, we're not affecting the housing market as much, in that there's less incentive to buy a rental property than build this secondary rental unit. Number of ADUs, again, ARP would say we're being too restrictive, but we propose 1 ADU per lot because that's the historic fabric that we have. Building setbacks, we already have that, let's just stick with it. Off-street parking, and here is a set of 6 blocks, right, or at least the same area, and I think this is a really important thing to remember with the borough. Very often somebody says parking or setbacks or use, and somebody thinks, okay, there's a part of the borough where that's a problem. Well, the borough is very diverse, and so what could, so here we have 40 lots on the left within that little rectangle, the red rectangle. And next over we have 18, and next over we have 12. So what could be appropriate for, the downtown area is not appropriate for the right, and vice versa. So when thinking about ADU policy, I think we need to craft this carefully around the zoning areas within the borough. This is one of the few pieces of legislation we would actually be proposing to change. And that has to do with the maximum height of the secondary structures. And we would say that to fit in with the historic character of the borough, that 15-foot is not, it's not appropriate for new ADU development. As an architect, I would also say it's actually not good for any, to have that as a limitation on any garages and secondary structures in the borough. On just this building on the left actually was restored recently and won a Westchester Preservation Award this past year. So I'm almost at the end. So moving forward, we propose, and what I'm asking tonight is really to take this discussion to Borough Council as a whole. And we, as Planning Commission, would like to continue to look into this and bring you some real legislation in the future, but that would presumably require working with our solicitor or somebody. So we proposed, if you can go back one, borough-wide legislation around ADUs, and I have some documents I'm going to give you tonight from ARP. And then on the next slide, one special, some design considerations we'd be working with, HARB and some of the others to find some very simple design guidelines to regulate new construction of ADUs along outlets. Perfect. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions?
I don't.
I guess the only question I have is when you mentioned about parking, in certain areas there would be parking, in certain areas there wouldn't be parking, potentially, right? If depending upon where they're built. But most likely these are probably going to be for elderly in-laws, and wouldn't they need parking?
I think no matter what, you're going to need parking. This would just be, so right now we just changed our parking requirements. A new study is needed for each project. And so looking at this as we craft that policy, one restricting factor could be, for example, that you only allow one bedroom per ADU. So then a policy could say, well, then you need one off-street. Currently, you would need two off-street per dwelling unit. Now that's a large townhome with 7 bathrooms and all kinds of bedrooms. Or one ADU, you still need 2. So one more careful consideration could say, well, let's only require one off-street. Or we could have, let's say, a parking study of the surrounding 6 blocks that says, hey, there's lots of off-street parking in the northwest, the northeast, and some of these other areas. And so we don't actually need to create more impervious surface for an off-street parking spot when we have all this open on-street.
No, I mean, I believe that makes sense. A parking study probably would make sense, especially if you're in Area B where I'm at, where there's almost no parking. It's very tough to park.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there are a couple ADUs. Actually, there's 1 or 2 in my alley. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration in those different areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the purpose of this presentation was just to give Smart Growth Committee and ultimately Borough Council an idea of what the Planning Commission has been working on, because we do need to get a consensus from Borough Council to continue on this venture of, coming up with regulations and crafting an ordinance, because obviously we're going to have to involve the borough solicitor at some point if we decide we want to continue this. So it's really to get, the temperature of Borough Council and see if they would be in favor of, allowing this and, making a future amendment to the zoning ordinance. So that's the purpose of the presentation. And one important thing to point out, and I don't want anybody here to think that the inclusion or the allowance of accessory dwelling units on any property or in the ordinance would just blanketly allow them on all properties in the borough. There's going to be certain regulations that and area and bulk requirements that would prohibit some properties from even being allowed to do it.
Probably most of the downtown itself just be off the table to start out.
So we will put those, regulations into place to control things,
They're already in place.
right?
I have a comment. I'm in favor of the idea. I think it's a great idea. Some further study would be really helpful. Number one, looking at what has happened since 2001, since we changed the ordinance with the historic carriage houses, what has been that impact? Perhaps our new hire with the data analyst can help with some GIS analysis. You know, where would this work? Where wouldn't it work? That kind of thing. So I'm in favor of with a lot more study and thought about it, but I think it's a good thing.
I would support it as well. I think it's worth reviewing.
I'm in agreement. So I guess we could further discuss this at next month's meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate if we could just move it forward to discussion for next week and then move this item forward to discussion for next week.
To the work session
Yeah.
next week? Is that what the committee's recommending?
I believe that's what I'm recommending, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
And Chris Patriarca, who's sits on the staff, just be there, would be able to.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any comments? Yes?
And I have a question for you. Two questions. I'm just wondering, is the purpose of the ADU, what is the end goal? For more affordable housing or?
So I did have that one slide. I mean, these are documents from AARP, which, you know, this has been something that thankfully municipalities across the country have been pursuing and studying and for 10, 15 years now. So there's a host of reasons. I would say one of the kickoff reasons was, how do we allow elderly to age in place, especially with disappearing elderly? And another big one for California was, how do we allow people to not default on mortgages, as was happening in Massachusetts, allowing people to make the most of that law?
So would this then be like the alternative to the mother-in-law suite?
A mother-in-law suite is another name for it. So as you mentioned,
So
you know,
this
we
would only,
have an ADU ordinance at the moment, which is the Historic Heritage Ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
But ADU suites are, mother-in-law suites are not allowed in the borough.
so this is just a,
This is legalized. ADU is a catch-all phrase for, there, if you're in here too, they'll have a whole page of all the different names that ADUs.
and then one more question. So these ADUs would basically be on private property at the homeowner's discretion if they should choose to build one. Is that my understanding, or is it?
That is correct. Obviously, lots of stipulations around it. But yeah.
Sure, sure. Okay.
So, and interesting, if I could, 10 years ago, when this was being first passed, there was thought around, or the number one reason was elderly, number two was probably affordable housing. And so they were thinking, let's stipulate that if you're going to build it, or if you're going to rent it, you have to rent it at, 80% AMI, some factor below. They ended up not doing that in many places, and further studies coming back showed that despite that, in Portland, for example, most were rented at something like 25% of what the average rent. And that's largely because of the flexibility. Let's say that it's, for the first 3 or 4 years, you do have an aging loved one. Then you're renting it out. Then you're using it as a home. Then you're using, and COVID has even pushed more advocacy for these ADUs as a flexible space to allow people to have the aging loved one space. Most municipalities are hugely supportive.
Like small homes, small houses, small homes.
It's usually like a little living
Okay.
space above a garage. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Is that for me? And for you, sir, 2 questions. Early on, you mentioned about the potential sale at Davis Oil. So my question is twofold. One, is in that agreement of sale, is there remediation of the property there? Okay.
It's already
And secondly, I know that property has been abandoned for a few years now. So I guess my question is, and you've been ticketing and fines and levying fines against the estate for quite a while. Why? I mean, I can't believe they're getting peanuts for it. I can't believe that. It's hard to believe that the Davises are insolvent when they've been multi-millionaires for years. So, and now they're selling this good parcel of land. So I'm just wondering, why isn't there a fine against the estate so that we can recoup our money? Why isn't that just, the estate have to pay the expenses? Oh, good. So the estate can't pay them. Guess my question is, so nobody in the Davis family will be benefiting from it?
Thank you. And for the sake of time, let's move over to item number C.
So item number C is discuss the tree commission's proposal for a linear park at 400 East Gay Street, right across Gay Street here. A couple months ago, the tree commission came to the planning commission with this idea of installing this linear park along the right-of-way from South Adams easterly toward almost to the end of the Borough Hall property on the south side of Gay Street. The planning commission did look at this. They did make a favorable recommendation to consider doing this project. One of the caveats that the planning commission would like to see if we do intend to move forward with this is to on the borough's official map is to delineate that portion of the right-of-way along there as a borough park. But those are things that we would have to discuss if it's something that we want to explore. But with that, I'll turn it over to the Jeff Bytel, is the chair of the Tree Commission, for a quick presentation on their plan here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for your time tonight for us to introduce this concept plan to you. As Kevin said, we've been working on this idea for, probably about a year. We're trying to be a little proactive on the Tree Commission and do some, present some ideas that will enhance the tree canopy and that part of our infrastructure, the tree infrastructure in the borough. And we were looking for areas where we could really make a big positive impact. I was on the comprehensive plan team, and one of the things we talked about was the fact that, the east entrance into this borough is pretty abysmal. And we wanted to, we talked about trying to enhance that feeling of entering into the historic borough of Westchester. We also talked about trying to make it more pedestrian friendly down here in this part of town so that it would encourage downtown to want to try to move down this way, and we could maybe have some better quality of development down here. And we feel that we hit a lot of the key points that the comprehensive plan is trying to do for this part of town. And the fact that it's right across the street from Borough Hall, we really can make a statement, because obviously the borough controls this side of the street. And we thought we could work within the right of way on the other side of the street, and we could really make a statement here in this entrance. So we want you to consider this as a concept. We would hope, as you know, the Planning Commission was very enthusiastic about the idea. But we're here tonight that we want to try to get a reading from Borough Council, whether you believe it's a worthy concept that we should continue developing. Obviously, we have developed some real world costs for it. And we would then need to start looking at how we can maybe find some sources of funding through grants, whatever. But we're not going to do that until we know that Borough Council kind of endorses this idea. So I just wanted to introduce it. Now I'm going to turn it over to Chris Puglisi. He is the designer of this, and he can explain a little bit about where the concepts came from and what we're planning on doing. So Chris?
Chris Pugliese, this is my second go-around on the tree commission. I am a landscape architect, and I'm responsible for the plan and sketch here. So this really should be seen as an enhanced streetscape, and enhancements would include not only plants, but the inclusion of some rain gardens, which would utilize some of the parking lanes. As well as, the biggest intervention here, aside from that, would be the bump outs on the four corners, which would mimic what's going on in the downtown district to the west of here. And in essence, it would be an introduction to that, since it's a block away from that historic area. It'd be sort of an introduction to the borough, and we would be sort of pulling that feel that you see that characterizes that part of the downtown a block east, or 2 blocks east, I should say. The other thing that was discussed was the idea of the bump outs would actually be sort of a traffic calming device, as it is in other places that we've seen in the borough. And we felt that was an idea that had some merit to it. Essentially, we're departing from the normal straight, follow the street linear line and putting a bit of a curve in there, just to make it a little more interesting, a little more of a different experience. But the idea too would be to utilize some porous paving for the sidewalk, except for the areas where we crossed over curb cuts, which we would have to resort to concrete. This particular plan is honoring the 2 of the existing, actually 3 of the existing curb cuts if you include the one on Adams Street. However, we know that these parcels here, could be developed in the future, and that may change in the future based on where the parking ends up, et cetera. And the parking may not end up in the front of the building anyway, if I've heard the planning commission comments correctly. Essentially, I don't know if you have any other questions about it that I could answer, but it's really seen as an enhancement and an aesthetic value that's at this point is distracting from the area behind it. Not that that won't change in the future, but I know those lots have been vacant for decades, so I don't know what's going to happen there, but we just thought we'd be proactive and try to tackle what we see as a problem in a way which we're able to do as tree commission members.
I just have a couple more comments. One of the things that Chris touched on a little bit is porous paving, and the rain gardens. We see this as a way to begin some stormwater management mitigation of the flooding issues we have down at Goose Creek. This is not obviously going to solve it, but we need to start thinking out of the box a little bit with individual projects like this that can start to help what we have going on down here, which has been a continual problem for the 35 years I've lived in the borough. We also would like it to have an educational component where we would put a sign in there that would actually educate people as to what this park is doing with the porous pavement, with the rain gardens, with the street trees themselves, which we would advocate being planted in like a silva cell type structure where you actually are allowing the rainwater to get in there to this chamber, and the street trees can actually absorb it. So we would want an educational component to it as well. So we thought we were hitting a whole lot of marks here. And it's just such a highly valuable visual spot in the borough. And if we do something like this that enhances the street, beautifies this area, we were hoping that it would start to drive a different type of development, that developers might start thinking of this area differently, and we wouldn't get another, auto parts store or something like that. We're hoping that we can bring the positive development down here, which would be multi-use building, maybe residential, above commercial or something like that. So we thought we were trying to do a lot of things with this, and we hope that you would endorse it. That's what we're looking for tonight, is for your recommendation for us to approach full council with the concept, so that we know we have your backing to continue on with the project.
I just want to say I do like the project. I think it looks great. But you mentioned costs. How much would this, in your estimation,
Chris got
cost?
some real-world estimates.
Some of the plants could come probably from the tree budget, although there's not a huge number of trees here. There's a lot of other plants, but that was my off the cuff, not off the cuff, but my based on my research, just to establish a budget, for example. So I don't think it's a decent number to at least toss around right now. So.
Is this a 1 to 3 year plan, 3 to 5 year plan? I mean, how long, assuming the funding is available, how long would it take to implement something like this?
I would think, well, I would hope, given the location of this, that we wouldn't be there too long. I think 3 months maybe. There's not all that. I mean, there's a lot of demolition work, but primarily it's half demolished anyway. If you look at that sidewalk, yeah, I mean, there's curbs and there's some paving work. Planting work would not be that long. But I don't think it's something that you'd want to belabor for a long period of time. The idea would be get it in and out of there as quick as possible. I don't think it would take more than 3 months.
I really like it. I think it's a
Thank you.
great enhancement.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's great. We can get somebody else to pay for it through grants. That would be the best ideal situation, but I'm in favor of it.
And Sean, do we need to put this on or move forward with this? I mean, I don't hear any objections from either of you, correct?
3-0 for work
Yep.
session.
Correct. All right, up next, action items A.
All right, so action item A is for the approval of the preliminary land development for 250 East Market Street, also in former site of the Rubenstein's building there. Developer is here tonight. I'll turn the mic over here shortly to him. But they're proposing a 219 unit apartment building with 227 parking spaces on site. The planning commission did make a favorable recommendation for approval of the preliminary plan. There are still several outstanding items that need to be corrected that will be addressed during final land development submittal. And a lot of those have to do with the technical aspects of the floodplain and getting their permits through the FEMA, Army Corps of Engineer, and DEP is a large aspect of it. They are requesting a couple of waivers, which the applicant will go through. The waivers that they are requesting, the consultants have provided a favorable support of those waivers. Some of them are just technical in nature, and excuse me, sorry, lost my train of thought. And the waivers would be, I'm sorry, the planning commission also suggested approval of those waivers too. That's where I was trying to go. So with that, I will turn it over to Eli Kahn and Matt Adams for a presentation on this project.
Good evening, folks. How are you?
Good
Eli
evening.
Kahn,
Welcome.
representing the ownership. I don't know how much of a presentation you all are looking for. We have renderings and everything that we've presented to the Planning Commission. Do you want the full Megillah, or would you like a kind of abbreviated version of the presentation?
The abbreviated version.
Okay. This is Matt Adams, my partner. So this is the former Rubenstein's building. Everybody knows it is that. Prior to the Rubensteins occupying the building, maybe 50 years ago, it was the home of the Darlington Wagon Wheel Factory. These are some renderings of the building back in the late 1800s of what this block looked like. So this property has a long industrial history in the borough. Is a very well-respected national wagon wheel factory. We're hoping to actually use some of this history in the naming of the new apartment project and use some of this history in the design and marketing of the project. Basically, this is a podium construction. So the majority of the first floor of the building, as you go down Franklin Street, is a parking. You can, yeah, here we go. Matt, Kevin has the renderings up. So the lower left-hand photograph is looking southwest across Market Street. What you would be looking at today would be the Rubenstein's building. Obviously single-story warehouse buildings. The frontage of the building is trying to take off some of the industrial history of the property. And then where you see that white car in the lower left-hand corner going down Franklin Street would be parking underneath the building. And we're proposing a green wall all the way down along Franklin Street. There will be two exterior plazas in this. The building is shaped like an S in order to create two outdoor areas that would be amenity spaces specifically for the residents of the building. project has developed over the years. We developed the Chestnut Square apartment project, which is kind of a higher end project. The goal of this project is to create a more affordable product. We are marketing this project to both the senior as well as the Gen Z / millennial young millennial marketplace, looking for smaller units, high quality amenities, secure parking. What we've seen at Chestnut Square is a tremendous demand for older people and younger people looking for the same type of housing. Secure, smaller units with all of the amenities that a Chestnut Square would normally provide. So this project only has about 18% 2-bedroom units. The rest are 1-bedroom and studio apartments. We, as part of this project several years ago, when we were in front of Borough Council, I don't know, do you have the plan that shows the park plan, or Matt does here, the site plan? So as everybody knows, to the west of this property is the property owned by SEPTA. Years ago, the Rubenstein family leased the lot Matt's pointing to as parking. Many of you know that as just a stoned parking lot immediately east of the former train station. There you go. So 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, there was an effort by a local business person in this neighborhood to see if they could convince SEPTA to kind of ease the ground or give the ground to create a public space. It didn't really go anywhere. The person who proposed it met with Matt and I and kind of handed the ball to us. We took it to Borough Council at the time and seemed to get a positive feedback, provided the borough could control this piece of land. The borough, I believe, has a lease on the property. I think it's a 5-year lease that gets renewed every 5 years. As you know, this is a site of the Westchester Rail Company, and they have a little putt-putt rail that goes down and back to south of here on holidays. So the thought here, which we picked up on, we presented to Borough Council 3 or 4 years ago, was to create a green space on the front half of the lot, a public green space. It wasn't proposed to be active green space. As many of you know, there is a quote unquote park. I think it's the John O'Green asphalted fake grass park just south of here. The thought was that this neighborhood could really use some public green, but not give up on the parking for both the rail line or any other public parking, and utilize the southern part of the property, which is really just has some SEPTA backhoes and piles of debris back there as actual parking that would come in off of Minor Street. Matt, just highlight Minor Street, dead ends right there. Actually, Minor Street actually goes through that area and dead ends right there. So this was something that we had presented before. In the reintroduction of this plan, we're presenting it again. I don't know how current Borough Council would feel about this. We don't obviously control this ground, but our proposal was to build the green area, turf it, plant whatever trees you want. The idea was to make this a passive green space for people in this area to utilize. It's not required as part of our application. It was really just us trying to offer something to the borough to use private dollars to get a public amenity for the borough. Again, as I said, it's not really, it's part of our application. If you all say to us, not interested, it goes away. If you say we're interested, we'll continue to pursue it. Obviously, we need your help in securing a long-term lease or even a long-term, or actually the fee ownership of this piece of ground from SEPTA. So I'll leave that where it is. Everything else is pretty much self-explanatory, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just a couple here. When you mentioned affordable, what would the range be for, in your definition of affordable, for one bedroom and
it's not subsidized housing. It's it's more affordable than our Chestnut Square project. And the only way we're able to achieve more affordable housing is to shrink the size of the unit. And Chestnut Square has given us such a great data point of what, and again, we remain like always, like 99.9% leased at Chestnut Square. But we still have all these people coming in and saying, what's your least expensive unit? And unfortunately, at Chestnut Square, our least expensive units are always leased. They never really come up. So the idea was to take that model of our least expensive unit in the, I would say in the, $1,300 to $1,500 range and create more of those. And again, what we continue to see is this 75-year-old, 70-year-old male or female coming in and saying, listen, I just need a small apartment. I don't want to live in a 40-year-old park over here. I want this. I don't have anything. I don't have a lot of things. And it's uniquely similar to what we see Gen Z and late millennials want the same. They don't have a lot of stuff. And I think we're kind of in the first time, at least in my experience, where these massively different generations really need the same type of housing. And we think a lot of them can benefit from co-housing together. I've told the story a number of times. I had an experience at Chestnut Square where I went there prior to a borough meeting and just sat with my laptop in a room in the amenity area where there's a pool table and TVs, and I was doing some work, and I was hearing this banter going on between these two obviously older gentlemen and two, hipster millennial kids. And I turned the corner, I got up, I said, what is going on over there? And these four guys were playing pool. These two 20-somethings and these two 70-somethings. The two 70-somethings, one lost his wife, and he decided to move to Chestnut Square and convinced his neighbor, his best friend, he and his wife, to move in with him. They had side-by-side apartments, two 70-year-old, one single man, one older couple. And they played pool their whole life. So these two millennial kids used to see them playing pool all the time, knew nothing about pool. They ended up kind of having this Thursday night pool thing. And, the two older guys were drinking scotch. The two younger guys were, drinking some IPAs. But I spoke to them, and they both got so much out of it. Like the two younger guys got to, hear stories of these two older guys and their history and the services. And I think historically in our society, we have age-restricted housing and senior housing, and really the type of housing these groups need today are more similar than ever before, and they can cohabitate together. That's really the goal of this project.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just have a question on the green space. Would you be, the maintenance of that green space, would that be turned over to the borough? Is that something that you would take care, your team would take care of? What would be the plan for that green space?
So Lisa, that's a great question. I don't know that I've really thought about it. I mean, my thought is if it's open to the public, I would ask the borough to maintain it. We would do the initial construction and hand it over to the borough. Again, I don't know that the maintenance is much more than grass cutting because there's no ball field or, shuffleboard. And again, if that's something the borough wanted, it certainly could be accommodated here. I think this neighborhood, if we had an aerial that blew out of this, went down south, and you'd see that there's really almost no park-like areas here, that this could be just a place where you could, kick a ball, walk your dog, throw a Frisbee, put a blanket down, and and just hang out. Where right now it's just this stone parking lot that is doing really, I mean, the borough doesn't generate any revenues from this. People just park in this lot for free. SEPTA doesn't really care. I think, again, the borough controls it via their lease from SEPTA, but it's just this thing that is out there. And I think it's a great opportunity to create something that would benefit, other people in this neighborhood.
No, I love that idea. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm very much in favor of
Okay.
the green space.
Terrific.
I just had, and I'm sorry if I'm asking repeat questions from the
okay.
planning commission because I don't have their minutes. So, so on the waivers, the one thing that, I don't want to say concerns me, but the Franklin Street Cartway, keeping it at 40 feet with the, going two directions. And I didn't see anything addressing that, but that may have been addressed somewhere in terms of
So,
the impact.
Patrick, what ended up happening there is the borough traffic engineer and engineer both kind of agreed at the end of the day that if you look at Franklin Street as it continues south past our property, widening it does not, because the rest of the street is not widened. And we have almost no parking on Franklin Street, where the block south of us, where the stacked townhouses were built, has basically the same width, but actually has parking on one side of the street. So net effective, it's actually less wide than our property. So
I guess my only concern was just, emergency vehicles, moving trucks, that kind of stuff.
really no issue. Your traffic engineer and your township engineer had really no issue with supporting that waiver.
Engineer, one of the concerns was if we just widen the half of the South Franklin Street along their site, then you're going to have this bizarre scenario where it then narrows back down beyond the site further down South Franklin Street. And he thought that might create an even worse scenario because we don't know when South Franklin Street or if it'll ever be redeveloped further down the line. So we didn't want to put it in a position where you just have, a 50-foot right of way going down to a 40-foot right of way.
Thanks. And just one other question. And it helps. It's the first time I was seeing the elevation. So that is really helpful. And I think the answer to my question is self-evident, but both TCA and Chester County had talked about, because of the height, having setbacks, et cetera. But I'm assuming the S shape, and having that is what is, bringing more light in, which was the intent, I think, of the setback.
I think what you're referring to is a step back, not a setback. So the step back is something that TCA has kind of pushed in a lot of projects. At the corner of Gay Street and Church Street, where we did Jack's Corner, we had an 8-story building approved there. And there, we agreed to a step back at a certain point in time because it was a 95-foot tall building. The step back in a building of this size creates way more havoc, and it was only on Market Street. So the idea that we created this S building creates light into the apartments, and it really is it's a difficult thing in a 4 or 5 story building. Great. Okay, great. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
So is that a 3-0 recommendation?
Yeah, I have no objections, no further objections. Item number B.
Yeah, this one's much easier. This is the approval of a land development application for 601 and 605 Price Street. let me preface this by saying there is no land development associated with this application. We just collectively call all of them land development applications and submissions. This is simply a lot line change. 601 is taking, Jeff, if you can pull the plan up for that, 601 and 605, there you go. So the property on the right, is that 605? 601, excuse me, 601 is on the right-hand side. 601 is purchasing a strip of land there from 605 in order to take up some of that area. The little backstory on this property, the property owners at 605 had originally submitted a land development application to subdivide that portion of land and build a house there. That project stalled, and then the two property owners came to an agreement to this plan here. So they would purchase some of the land and effectively eliminate any ability to subdivide and build a house there. So that's what we see today. It's a simple lot line change. It meets all of the zoning requirements for the block, or not the block class there, excuse me, but the street, Price Street block face is the word I was looking for. And all the area and bulk regulations are met. So Planning Commission obviously made a favorable recommendation for approval of this plan.
Anyone have any questions?
No questions for me.
Present. Also with me is Jim Cagney. My name is John Mahoney. I'm an attorney. I represent the applicants, which are Connie and Roger Partridge. A little backstory, a little modification of what Kevin just explained. There was a variance application submitted by the owners of 605. They were trying to subdivide. Had an uphill battle. It would have been contested by the Partridges rather than simply trying to subdivide and make some money through that subdivision process. The owners of 605 elected to sell 20 feet of width, 150 feet of depth of their property to my clients. It's a lot line change. It is not a land development. It is a subdivision because it's a redivision of a lot line. It simply moves the lot line 20 feet to the west. That's all there is to it.
Thank you. And
We
then
look for a favorable recommendation. We have one for them. We have to get the borough council as soon as possible.
thank you. Planning Commission, they voted, it was 7-0. I saw unanimous. I don't see any objection.
No objection.
All right. Item number C.
C is to approve a second dining platform for Lemoncello Restaurant at 9 North Walnut. I had the second platform at 5 North Walnut, and Lemoncello is located at 9 North Walnut. This application was submitted by Lemoncello's as they had recently purchased 5 North Walnut, which is that was the dentist's office or something like that, doctor. And they're currently undergoing some renovations there, but Lemoncello's would like to install another platform in front of 5. And you can see on the plan here, it's the area that's indicated by the arrow, new patio, and it's that hashed area. It's 1 parking space. Obviously, this is just like we went through last week with Split Rail. They need permission to add a second platform because the ordinance doesn't allow it. I sent this to the police department for review. They had a concern about the proximity of this new platform to the intersection. They had concerns about maneuvering clearances of vehicles making that turn and having pedestrians sitting that close to those vehicles making that turn off of Market Street. That was their only concern. Can't say that I think I share that same concern as them, but they obviously make the ultimate decision on traffic safety. But the applicant's here tonight to discuss the specifics of their project, so I can turn it over to them and their legal counsel to answer any questions.
Yes, and I did see your email with Lieutenant Lee, in which case he indicated your same concerns, obviously, and I do have those same concerns as you're making the left onto Walnut Street. And his recommendation was just to add barriers around there. And, I mean, that's where I'm at as well.
Right. So yeah, that was to add a, whether it's a Jersey barrier or some other type of traffic barrier on the south side of that platform. And we'd have to discuss on whether or not we're going to put them along the travel lane as well. Yeah, that's something we could look at. If that were the case, then obviously it's going to shrink the size of the platform in order to accommodate any additional barriers that would be along the travel lane.
Just one question. So did they say what distance from the corner would be acceptable?
They did not provide any details on that dimension. They just had concerns about the proximity. I can say that I happened to be sitting there the other day at the light, and a bus was making a left-hand turn on the Walnut there. And they currently have a dumpster sitting there for the construction, which is pretty close to where the platform would be, right, Frank? Yeah, and it's close. It's very, very close. So if it were to be approved, I think we definitely need to look at additional safety measures to protect anybody there.
Do these platforms, are they standard lengths? I mean, this is 23 feet. I mean, do they come in 10-foot?
Essentially asking for the same thing. I wish this one was up there. It's driven by shallow. See it, right? Is what we're asking for. That's only one spot. It's not going to be. To the side. Left onto Wall Street. It's another spot. So specs on these things are very
No, thank you. For the record, I never had a bad meal at La Michelle. I'll tell you that right now. I mean, you guys do great work. Um, Again, my only concern is a safety concern. You mentioned it. So that's the only thing that, let's just be cognizant of. Other than that, I don't have an objection unless anybody else does.
No objection.
Yeah, I have no objection. I think it's a great idea. I share the safety. That the only reason I asked about the modular nature is if you had to shrink it by 3 feet or something to address that and not have to put some other kind of barrier or something up, seems like would be an easier solution. But overall, I have absolutely no objection to it. Sure, I just didn't know. That's why I asked the question about what was the distance that they said would be appropriate. But I agree that there's already parking space there now. Nobody ever hits that, so.
Yeah, I think the best course here is if Borough Council is obviously amenable to allowing them to install this, after that, we can then work with Lemicello to determine, and the police department determine what the best length would be for that and where that barrier should be located.
I'm fine with that, and as long as you're fine with that. Any other comment? I think we're good. All right, item number D.
Item D, I'm just going to turn this right over to Mr. O'Brien to discuss this.
So, John O'Brien, Executive Director, Westchester Business Improvement District. We kind of touched on this last month. There was a long meeting and there were a couple details and I didn't want to waste anybody's time. So we tightened up the request from council. So the idea is that as a kickoff to summer, we will host an event called Fête La Musique, which is started in Paris. It's basically an open roll call to musicians, whether they are young students to older, more experienced musicians, to come out and showcase their talents by playing throughout downtown Westchester. The borough currently has an ordinance around busking that prevents anybody from just setting up on the street. So the request would be from noon on the 21st till 9 p.m. that we have temporary reprieve from the busking ordinance with the agreement that those participating will get a list of the musicians and where they will be playing. I would note that it's a little subject to change based on people showing up and their availability. And we will also make a requirement that if you're participating, not to have like your suitcase open for receiving money at that point, because that's one of the natures of the busking ordinance. So that's basically the concept. I don't know if council had any questions about that.
I don't have any questions.
No, I thought it was clear.
One
That's-
caveat I forgot to put on this, we were going to have a rain date of Thursday, June 23rd. Just
I
so
saw
can
that in
get
the document.
clearance.
I have no objections to that.
No objections.
Yep,
Thank you.
we're good to go. 3-0. Item E.
Yes, is a zoning hearing board application for 118 South Walnut. The applicant is seeking relief to allow a deck to be closer than 3 feet to their side lot line. So the ask here is whether or not Borough Council chooses to send the solicitor to oppose this application. As a zoning officer, my recommendation is that this is a dimensional variance and that we should not send the borough solicitor for this application.
I have no objection to that.
3.
Yes and no. I think that was also put in there to provide some type of fire safety separation. So if decks are, for towns, if they're attached like that, in certain cases, if there's going to be a fire separation put in there, we could definitely, we would, from a building perspective, we would approve that. But the problem is we have to send it to the zoning hearing board for a variance because of that language in there. So. Right. Yeah, certainly something we can explore.
That's an excellent point.
HARB applications. I don't know if you want to go through these one at a time. And do them pretty briefly.
They were all approved for the most part unanimously.
They were all approved, with some of them with conditions. I'd like to point out, number 4 on this application, that was a cut and paste error. That one was approved as submitted by HARB. We just mistakenly copied the proposed work on there and didn't put in the actual recommendation from HARB. But again, that was as submitted. Most of these are fairly simplistic applications and standard recommendations from HARB.
Just a quick question on number 4. I saw something about there were the original sign, and then they talked about doing pin letters. What was the end result of that? I'm not sure that I saw.
Hear what you had said they were proposing.
So there's, I'm sorry, it's number 5. No, sorry, not 5. This was a sign, and wasn't HARB had at some point
I think these,
recommended the pin letters instead of a solid sign?
I think that was item number 3.
That was number 3 for 17 West Gay Street. Yeah. Sorry, there must have been an issue here with the formatting on that. The recommendation from HARB for the 17 West Gay Street was to approve with the following conditions: that the sign be installed to match the dimensions and details of the pin-mounted letter sign that was presented at the meeting at the time of HARB superseding the initially submitted application. So it was the size of the sign. What I take from that is that they can go with the board mounted sign, but in the same dimension of the proposal for the pin mounted letter sign.
Does anyone have any objections or questions about any of these items on number or on under F? Okay, it looks like we can move forward on all of them. And the last item is G, to approve the 2021 Smart Growth Minutes. Don't see any objection to them.
Approved.
3-0 approval. And any other comments? All right, meeting adjourned.